Hello Story Store listeners. Before we start this interesting story, please subscribe this channel, Story Store, and hit the bell icon. Thank you. Now here we go. The afternoon sun spilled over the California suburb like liquid gold, warming the neatly trimmed lawns and casting long shadows from the eucalyptus trees lining the street. It was the kind of Saturday that felt like a postcard, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of a lawnmower. Inside the house, the air was alive with the clatter of glasses, the murmur of conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter that floated out through the open patio doors. Sarah, my daughter, was in her element, holding court in the backyard with a glass of rose in hand, her auburn hair catching the light as she gestured animatedly. Her guest colleagues from her marketing firm, a few of her husband Daniel's tennis partners, and a handful of women from her yoga studio clustered around her, their voices rising and falling like a practiced symphony. I, Margaret Ann Thompson, stayed where I always did, on the edges, in the kitchen, tending to the details that kept the gathering seamless. I slid a tray of lemon bars from the oven, their buttery aroma mingling with the faint tang of citrus. The recipe was my grandmother's, one I'd perfected over decades, each bite a small piece of my history. I arranged the bars on a porcelain platter, wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron, and carried them out to the patio with the same quiet care I'd honed over years of hosting, of being the woman who made things happen without ever being noticed. The backyard buzzed with energy. Sarah stood at the center, her laugh a little too sharp, her movements a little too grand. I caught Daniel's eye as I stepped outside. He offered a tight smile, the kind you give a stranger out of obligation, then turned back to his conversation. "Lemon bars, everyone," I said softly, holding out the tray. A few guests turned, some taking a bar with a polite nod, one woman biting into hers and murmuring, "Oh, these are divine." That's when Sarah's voice cut through, bright and careless. "Oh, she just kind of stays here," she said, waving a hand in my direction as if I were a piece of furniture, a lamp that had always been in the corner. The laughter that followed wasn't malicious, but it was sharp, uneasy, the kind that stings because it doesn't know it hurts. I stood there, tray in hand, my fingers tightening around the edges, willing them not to tremble. I looked at Daniel, but he was studying his drink. No one corrected her. No one said, "That's your mother, Sarah." No one asked her to stop. Turned, walked back into the house, and set the tray on the counter. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of silence. I collected empty glasses, scraped plates, rinsed dishes, until my hands were raw. No one thanked me. By the time Sarah's heels clicked up the stairs and the last guest drove away, I was polishing the kitchen island until it gleamed under the pendant lights. Daniel passed behind me, mumbling, "Thanks, Margaret," before disappearing into the study. Not Mom, not even mother-in-law, just Margaret, like I was a hired hand. 3 days later, I was alone in the kitchen again, brewing chamomile tea in the early morning quiet. I reached for my favorite mug, a chipped ceramic one with a faded daisy pattern, and in my distraction, my hand brushed against a wine glass on the drying rack. It fell, shattering on the tile floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. "Damn it," I whispered, crouching to gather the shards. I didn't hear Sarah come in. "What did you do now?" She snapped, her voice slicing through the air. "I'm so sorry. I began." But she cut me off with a raised hand. "You should know your place," she said, her tone cold and precise. "Don't think you have a right to be here." I looked up at her, glass fragments still in my hands. "Sarah, I'm your mother," I said softly. "You think that matters?" She shot back, pulling her phone from her pocket. "Get out now." Or I swear I thought she was bluffing, but then her thumb tapped the screen, and I heard the dial tone. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello? Yes, she said, calm as if ordering takeout. I need to file a trespassing report. I didn't hear the rest. I stood, brushing past her, and walked out to the backyard, where my lavender and thyme still grew in neat rows. The sun was too bright, the air too warm. This garden was mine, every sprig, every root, planted with care over years of tending. It was the last piece of this house that felt like home. Yet even here, her voice carried, sharp and certain, speaking to someone on the other end of the line. She was really doing it. She was calling the police. Standing barefoot on the patio, surrounded by the plants I'd nurtured, I realized something I'd avoided for too long. Sarah didn't see me as her mother anymore. To her, I was a burden, an inconvenience, a shadow to be swept away. For the first time since my husband Thomas died, I didn't feel old or weary. I felt awake, a cold, clear kind of awake. This wasn't my home anymore, but it was still my house. And for the first time in years, I was going to act like it. It was the autumn of 1980 when Thomas and I first saw the Craftsman bungalow on a quiet street in this same California suburb. The porch sagged, the windows rattled in their frames, and the backyard was a tangle of weeds, but to us, it was a dream. We'd been married 15 years, scraping by on his mechanic's salary and my part-time work at the library. No lavish vacations, no fancy dinners, just hard work and small joys, like the time we camped in a friend's trailer by the lake, sharing instant coffee and a single sleeping bag. That was us. No extravagance, just love. Thomas ran his hand along the warped porch railing that first day and said, "It's got character, Maggie." Like us, we bought it, the tired house with its cracked stucco and creaky floors, and made it ours. I remember the summer we painted the dining room. Thomas perched on a ladder in a faded flannel shirt, whistling Sinatra tunes. Sarah, barely 5, twirled around us in a sundress, her pigtails bouncing, a smudge of blue paint on her nose. "Careful, sweetheart," Thomas called, grinning, "or Mama's gonna paint you instead." She giggled, spinning faster, her laughter filling the room like sunlight. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Dinners on the porch, homemade Christmas ornaments, a vegetable garden that produced more zucchini than we could eat. That house saw it all. Thomas's layoffs, my late-night shifts, Sarah's first day of school, her broken arm at 9, her high school graduation. It held our life, woven into its walls. When Thomas was diagnosed with cancer in 2004, we turned the sunroom into his bedroom, the stairs too much for his weakening legs. I cooked broths, read to him, held his hand through the pain. He slipped away one winter morning, the room bathed in soft light, his favorite quilt tucked around him. I stayed in the house for 6 years after that, each creak a memory, each corner a whisper of Thomas's voice. But grief hollows you out, and loneliness creeps in like damp. In 2010, Sarah suggested I move in with her and Daniel. "It'll be better, Mom," she said. "You won't be alone, and we've got the space." I hesitated. The house was mine, paid for with every overtime shift Thomas ever worked, every coupon I clipped. But I was tired, and the idea of family felt like a lifeline. So I packed my life photo albums, my mother's china, the quilt from our wedding, and rented out the bungalow for income. I moved into Sarah's modern 2-story, thinking it would be a new chapter. At first, it was warm. Sarah brought me coffee in the mornings. Daniel carried my boxers, and I thought, this is it. Family again. But slowly, things shifted. My knitting needles vanished from the living room. My old radio was replaced by a sleek speaker system. The house became hers, and I became a guest. Then came the rules. No cooking with onions after 6 p.m., no TV after 9, no rearranging the furniture. One day, Sarah said my herb pots on the deck looked messy. I moved them without a word, but something inside me cracked. There's a quiet pain in being erased by the person you raised, the one whose fevers you soothed, whose nightmares you chased away. I held on, telling myself it was temporary, that family meant patience. But Sarah didn't know, something didn't think to ask. The bungalow, the one Thomas and I poured our lives into, was still mine. The deed, the title, every nail and shingle, remained in my name. I kept the papers in a safe, tucked behind old love letters and a Polaroid of Sarah at her 5th birthday, blowing out candles. I hadn't signed it over. Not to her. Not to anyone. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the part of me that knew love doesn't always mean trust. Sarah's marriage to Daniel had seemed like a blessing at first. He was steady, polite, the kind of man who held doors and remembered birthdays. But his quietness wasn't kindness, was detachment. He let Sarah's words cut deeper, her rules tighten, without ever stepping in. It started small. Mom, maybe avoid curry. It lingers. Then, can you keep your shoes by the garage? It's cleaner. Soon it was. Could you stay in your room after 8? We're trying to wind down. I complied, folding myself smaller, quieter, until I was a shadow in their home. I cooked their meals, scrubbed their floors, tended their garden, but it was never enough. One night, I overheard them in the living room. I'd come downstairs for water, moving silently as always. Sarah's voice was low but clear. She's just always there. Daniel, it's exhausting, like having a guest who never leaves. He mumbled something I couldn't hear. She's emotional baggage, Sarah said, sharper now. We don't need that. I stood frozen in the hallway, the glass in my hand forgotten, my heart a stone. Emotional baggage, that's what I was to her. Not a mother, not a widow, just a weight to be carried. I didn't confront her. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the words settle. Silence isn't surrender, it's a tally. I was keeping score. It wasn't long before Sarah's disdain turned sharper. At a dinner party with Daniel's colleagues, I'd spent hours preparing a meal: braised short ribs, roasted vegetables, a raspberry tart. One guest complimented the food, asking Sarah if she'd cooked. She laughed, too loud, and said, "Oh God, no, that's our resident freeloaders' work." The table went quiet, then erupted in uneasy laughter. Daniel looked at his plate. I smiled, excused myself, and didn't return. Resident freeloader, in the house I'd built with Thomas, paid for with our sweat and dreams. That night, I lay awake, the words stacking like bricks in my mind. Sarah wasn't the girl who'd clung to me during thunderstorms, who'd drawn me pictures of hearts and stars. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as a burden, a relic to be tolerated until I could be discarded. Then came the day she pushed too far. It was a quiet Tuesday, the house smelling of lavender from the cleaner I'd used on the floors. I was folding laundry, Sarah's blouses, Daniel's shirts, my own faded sweaters, when Sarah walked in, holding a sleek folder. "Mom," she said, her voice too smooth, "I need a favor." I looked up, a pair of socks in my hands. "What kind?" She smiled. "The kind that doesn't touch the eyes. It's about the house. It'd be easier if it were in my name for taxes, refinancing, that sort of thing. Nothing changes. You'd still live here." My stomach tightened. "Still live here? In my own house?" I said, folding a towel with deliberate care. "I don't think that's necessary." Her smile faltered. "It's just a signature, Mom. You wouldn't even have to do anything. Mr. Larson can notarize it." I met her gaze. No. Her eyes narrowed. No. As if the word itself was an insult. "That house is mine," I said. "It's the only thing your father and I built together. I'm not signing it away." She stood, lips tight, and left. Without another word. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, my bank called. They had questions about a mortgage application tied to my address. Confused, I asked for details. That's when I learned Sarah had tried to secure a home equity loan using my house, forging documents that listed her as the owner, claiming she'd inherited it and was now managing my affairs as my caretaker. I requested copies of the papers. There it was, her signature, bold and careless, on forms that erased my life's work. That evening, I confronted her in the kitchen. I spoke to the bank, I said, standing in the doorway. I know what you did. She didn't flinch, just poured herself a glass of water. You shouldn't be poking around in things you don't understand, Mom. I understand perfectly, I said. You tried to steal my house. She sipped her water, then set it down. Look, she said, her voice sharp, you're not getting any younger. You don't work. You don't contribute. All you do is occupy space. I take care of this house, I said. I cook, I clean, you exist. She interrupted, like wallpaper. I stood my ground. It's my name on the deed. Her face twisted anger, entitlement, maybe a flicker of fear. Then she laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think that matters? You think that paper means something? You don't own this house, Mom, not really. You live here because we let you. Her words landed like blows. And if you won't cooperate, she continued, stepping closer, then maybe you shouldn't be here at all. What does that mean? It means, she said, each word deliberate, you have 1 week to leave, or I will call the police and tell them you're trespassing. That was the moment I saw her clearly, not as my daughter, but as someone who wanted everything. The house, the memories, the life I'd built, all without me in it. She thought my silence was weakness, but she was wrong. I wasn't the one trespassing. I was the one who held the deed. At 3 a.m. I moved quietly, as if the house might hear me. I packed a small suitcase, clothes, my wallet, Thomas's death certificate, our marriage license, and the deed to the house. I tucked in a photo of us from our wedding day, Thomas in his slightly too big suit, me in a dress I'd made myself. I wrote a note, short and final. Sarah, I don't hate you, but I'm done begging for space in a home I paid for with my life. I have nothing left to give, and nothing left to ask. I left it under a teacup she never used, slipped on my shoes, and walked out the back door. The night air was cool, scented with honeysuckle and asphalt. I didn't look back. I checked into a modest motel, the kind with thin towels and a humming vending machine. Sitting on the bed, I pulled out a card I'd kept for years. Robert Ellis, retired attorney, Thomas's old friend. I called him at dawn. Margaret, he said, voice rough with sleep. Everything okay? I need to talk, I said. Today, 10 a.m., my place, he replied. No questions asked. Robert lived in a cottage surrounded by lemon trees, the air thick with their scent. Over coffee, I showed him the deed, the purchase contract, the tax bills all in my name. She tried to take it, he said, shaking his head. But she can't. This house is yours, Margaret. I want to sell it, I said. As soon as possible. He studied me. You sure? Yes, he nodded. I'll handle the legal side. You'll need a realtor. I know someone, I said. That afternoon, I met with Emily Chen, a realtor whose mother I'd worked with years ago. I remembered Emily as a quiet girl, always reading in the library after school. I want it listed this week, I told her. No open houses, just private showings to serious buyers. She nodded. Understood. I'll handle it. That evening, we visited the house, my house. I stayed in the car while Emily took photos. I couldn't go inside, not anymore. When she returned, she handed me a form. The market's strong, she said. You'll get offers quickly. Sign here to authorize the listing. My hand was steady as I signed. The pen's scratch a quiet Declaration of Independence. That night, I moved to a hotel downtown. The city lights a reminder that I was no longer under anyone's roof. Emily worked fast. By 8 a.m., the listing was live. A charming craftsman with a mature garden, owned since 1980. By noon, she'd shown it virtually to 3 buyers. By 4 p.m., there were 3 offers: a young couple, a developer, and a retired teacher named Clara, who wanted a fresh start. I chose Clara, her offer clean and her voice kind, like mine once was. By sunset, the sale was done. The house was Clara's, and I was free. Sarah called that night, again and again. I didn't answer. The next morning, a courier delivered the sale documents to her door, along with a notice to vacate within 7 days. My name was on the sender line. Margaret Thompson. No mom, no softness. Sarah called Emily, claiming to be the owner. But Emily shut her down. All documentation is verified. Ms. Thompson is the sole owner and has exercised her rights. Sarah called me 9 times, leaving one voicemail. Mom, what are you doing? You can't sell this house. We live here. Are you losing your mind? Call me back, please. This isn't funny. She said we, never you. By evening, she'd called 25 times. I didn't answer. I sipped tea in my hotel room, watching the city glow, and felt the weight of years lift. The neighborhood noticed quickly. By midweek, whispers spread. Is Sarah getting evicted? Her mother sold the house. Sarah packed slowly, hoping for a reprieve that never came. On moving day, she stood on the curb with 2 suitcases, her phone buzzing with no one answering. Daniel didn't help. I'm going to my mom's, he said, driving off without a glance. That night, Sarah appeared at my new apartment, a high-rise I'd bought with the sale proceeds. She buzzed the intercom, her face pale on the monitor. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered. Please, let me in. I have nowhere to go. I watched her, then stepped onto the balcony. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. I said, don't ever think you can trick an old woman, especially your own mother. Her face fell. I turned, closed the curtain, and went back to my My new home was simple, with a small balcony where I grew mint and basil. The city hummed below, and I hummed back. Sarah called sometimes, but I didn't answer. I wasn't angry, just done. I'd remembered who I was, and I'd taken back what was mine. If you've ever been pushed out by someone you loved, if you've cleaned their home, cooked their meals, and still been called a burden, you'll understand. Silence isn't weakness. It's a blade, sharpened by memory. I used mine, not to hurt, but to reclaim. What do you think of this story? Have you ever had to reclaim something that was rightfully yours? And where are you watching this from? Subscribe to Story Storer for more tales of quiet justice, where we don't shout, we remember. Like, share, and let's keep telling the stories that matter.